How's it going, everyone? I'm always looking for a way to make my game more immersive for my players. Lately, I've been playing around with using lights. When used right, it brings the game to a completely different level. It better sets the mood and tone of your setting, and it helps players get into the minds of their characters. Let's say your player characters have been on a long journey. They're setting up camp as the sun sets. Now you could dim the lights in the room, and that almost gets it there. But it feels like you're just sitting in a dark room. But now imagine those players setting up camp. You have the sun setting, and then they start the fire. All of a sudden the moon peeks out from behind a cloud. You can set that scene much better if you had a couple lights. You can set one of them to a bluish tint, give it that moonlight feel, while you have a flickering amber light, almost as if someone just lit the fire. Well, that's really gonna bring that scene to life and make your players feel like they're there. Great way to add some extra immersion, but there's some things that you wanna keep in mind if you decide to use them. The first is going to be the type of light you want to use. There are plenty of relatively inexpensive RGB lights out there. These are okay. They will give you different hues. You can get some glow from them, but they're not going to be particularly powerful. Most of these run from about 5 to 20 watts. While they will have some effect on the setting, they're not going to be powerful enough to do as much with them. Now, the next type of light is a floodlight, and these are going to range anywhere from dirt cheap to pretty expensive. And if you look behind me, you'll notice that the lights I have running right now, about 90% of that light is from floodlights. There's actually a yellow one behind me here. As you can see, it's not really having that much of an effect on the overall color, and that's because the other ones are much more powerful. If you go with floodlights, I would recommend going with something that's a little bit higher, maybe 25 to 40 watts. You can go higher than that if you want to, but once you start getting up there in price, there's other options that might be a little better. After floodlights, we have what a lot of people use for uplighting, and they're canister lights. You probably have seen these at events. They're usually lined up along the wall, and they shoot straight up at the ceiling, casts a nice hue against the wall. These lights are great, but most of these tend to be pretty expensive. They are much brighter. A lot of them will have dials on the back that you use to set the color. Some of them have apps, but I think that's going to also affect your prices. Another option you have is they do have higher end RGB lights. I think Philips makes one. There's either bulb, little light mats, some of them even are in the shape of a floodlight. These are great as well. Again, they're gonna start getting pricey, especially if you get a bulb. You're gonna be spending quite a bit on that bulb. Plus you're gonna have a fixture to put them in. The next type of light, which is what I mostly use, are video lights. Behind me, there's one shining directly at the wall. The nice thing about these is these tend to be very bright. That one behind me is 100 watt. It's going to literally flood a scene with as much light as you want, and virtually any color that you want. The nice thing about these lights too is they tend to be more programmable, so you can set up different scenes, you have different effects with the lights, you can even alternate colors. I know some of the inexpensive options out there have that ability as well, but a lot of times they're programmed and you can't set the exact parameters you want on them. Then there's the actual use of these lights. How can we use them in our game to great effect? I think if you have any idea on color theory or painting, photography, any of those areas, it's a little bit easier because you have some understanding of how light works. But if you're not one of those people and you're not really familiar with color theory, there's certain tricks you can use to kind of get an okay result, even if you know nothing. So the first thing I would say is set the color of the light to match the scenario. As an example, your players are in a tavern. You would want to have a yellowish amber light to represent that setting. You're gonna have a lot of candles and torches and a fireplace, and that type of light tends to be on the warmer side. So just keep that in mind when you're setting up that setting. Another thing to think about is what color are the shadows? You'll notice when I opened up, I talked about the campsite, and I mentioned that there was a blue light from the moon and an amber light from the fire. Now, normally your shadows are going to be opposite of your highlight. And what I mean by that is if you have warm highlights, you're gonna have cool shadows. In that scenario, your main light is going to be the fire. That's going to be the brightest light. In the shadow areas, the ambient lighting is going to be from the moon, so it's going to have that cooler look. You can do the same thing for if you're in the forest. If you have two lights, you have the sunlight is going to be a warmer light. The light from the reflections off the leaves are going to have a cooler tone to them. You know, bluish greens. So you can play around with that with your lights. Now also incorporate colors that will evoke emotions you want to get from your players. As an example of this, if you have a red light, it's going to give a sense of urgency or danger. Looking up how different colors match to different emotions would be useful, because if you want to create that urgency, or if you want to create something serene and you went with blues and greens and that sort of effect, then you'll be able to get more of an emotional response from your players in the game. And if your lights are programmable and you can set up different effects with them, you might think about using those as well. Think of a strobing light. It might give you the sense of lightning outside or building on fire. There are so many different possibilities that you have with that. And if you incorporate colors with those effects, you can bring it to an even greater level. Imagine that red light flashing constantly. It's really gonna amp up your players and give them the sense that they have to move. Before you decide to use lights, it is very important that you take some precautions. One, make sure that everyone you're playing with doesn't have some type of medical condition that the lights are going to trigger. Epilepsy is a good example of that. You also want to make sure that you have them rigged up well and set up in a place where they're not going to get knocked over or fall on someone. More importantly, make sure that you don't have any flammable material near them, because some lights do get hot. You don't want to cause a fire. Lights can be a lot of fun at the table, and while some of them do require a little bit of an upfront cost, the investment's definitely worthwhile. I've left a list of lights that I use in the description. Take a look, see if there's anything there that interests you. Stay creative.